Hi guys, you're listening to Generation Z. I'm Katie, and this episode we're asking, should we reduce the voting age to 16? In 2015, 16 and 17-year-olds in Scotland were granted the vote in local elections after a push from young people urged Parliament to give the youth a voice. For a while, it began a discussion in England and a talking point for many politicians, but then the conversation started to die down. Due to the Brexit vote in 2016, the conversation has started again, and a lot of people feel it's time to refresh the voting laws to suit the current climate. I'm joined by Liesl Perenzi, a student of politics and sociology, and Shannon Benney, a journalism student, to talk about this today. You guys both have quite different opinions on this topic. Liesl, let's start with you. Why do you feel it's time for a change?
I think we need a change because when you turn 16, you earn the legal right to leave school and enter work and even join the military. And when important legislation concerning topics, for example, workers' rights, are voted on, 16-year-olds as a part of the workforce should also be allowed to vote on those rights because otherwise they just get left underrepresented. And if 16-year-olds are allowed to literally put their lives on the line for this country, I think that they should also be allowed to have a say in the legislation that gets put through, because essentially it just means that they're putting their lives on the line for a country that doesn't represent them, and I don't think that's right.
I think that 16-year-olds shouldn't be allowed to vote for the main reason that they're just a bit too young. Even though it can get them more involved in politics than the country itself, most of them won't even know who they're voting for and why. So 16-year-olds don't really care about politics as a general, consensus. They'll just vote for the person that's most popular or who their friends and family have encouraged them to vote for. I just don't think that's how voting should work. And even if they are mature enough to care and have a passion for politics, it won't hurt them to just wait 2 more years until they are legally allowed to vote so that they can expand their knowledge and get more caught up on current affairs.
Do you think that 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds are quite easily led then?
They're a lot more impressionable than 18-year-olds, I think.
I don't necessarily believe that that's true. For a start, there's not even that big of an age gap and the gap of maturity between 16 to 18-year-olds. And I think that the involvement of younger people in politics is definitely growing. For example, there's a youth parliament that sits all the time and they discuss issues, and politicians are getting more and more involved in things like social media, so they're able to spread their views, and people our age are much more connected to seeing what the politicians actually have to say for themselves. And as far as younger people not caring about politics, I think that younger people just feel disconnected from politics because they're not allowed to have the vote. And if they were actually offered the opportunity to vote, they would probably get themselves more involved. For example, in the 2014 Scottish independence referendum, 16-year-olds were given the right to vote, and 75% of 16 to 17-year-olds actually, in fact, did turn up and vote in the referendum. And I think that is a really good representation of just showing if you got them involved, they would be involved. And when you say that it wouldn't really hurt for them to wait 2 more years, although it does kind of seem like they're being a bit impatient, you could be 16 in one election where there is legislation concerning a really big part of something that could be your future, for example, things like university tuition fees. And if you're planning on going to university in 2 years, for example, I think that you should be able to have the vote. And if 16-year-olds were offered the vote, political parties would be much more likely to include things that concern people our age in their manifestos, which meant that we would be more represented.
When you're talking about voting for things that affect us as young people in the future, in terms of Brexit, even though I think statistics show that even if 16, 17-year-olds voted to remain, it wouldn't have actually changed the overall result. Do you think something so major as that we should have had a say in and we should have had the vote in? That question's kind of for both of you.
I don't think that... I think that shows how underrepresented our age group is, and how people don't care enough to want to vote for it, because it, like you said, that it wouldn't have changed anything. Therefore, I feel like there's not enough communities of people that actually want to step up and change Brexit and have a say in Brexit. So I think that just in itself has kind of shown.
I'm not really sure about that because, I mean, you said like a statistic showed that if 16 to 17-year-olds were offered the vote, that it would not have swayed anything. But, I mean, I don't know if that can be completely representative because it's not like they asked every single 16 to 17-year-old. And for, like, a referendum in Scotland, for example, so many of them did turn up. And if you consider the margins of the Brexit vote, like, it was such a small margin that Leave actually won. And I feel like if 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds were genuinely given the consideration and they said, oh, you can have this vote, they would have shown up, and it probably could have even swayed the vote, because I feel like it's a general consensus that more people our age did in fact want to remain.
And then Liesl, this question's for you. A lot of people say if it's not broke, don't fix it with this kind of topic. Do you think that that's a good enough response when it comes to politics?
I don't feel like that's a good enough response because there's always ways to improve our country, and I think that there shouldn't be an issue with wanting to seek representation for people, especially young people, because, I mean, the legislation is shaping our future and like our lives and our careers. So I think that younger people should be able to have a say.
Do you think that changing the vote will actually have a prominent impact on British politics and on society?
I don't think that we're a big enough age group to have a big enough impact, even if you got together all of the 16 and 17-year-olds that have been left out of each voting, like, election and stuff. Like, it's still not enough, like, it's not a big enough age group to have an impact. Like, you still have all the, like, middle-aged and young adults and older individuals, like, still voting. So it would probably make a difference, but it wouldn't make enough of a difference to make changes, like big changes.
I think it kind of depends about the actual political climate of the time. For example, if it's a government that has a really, really small minority and the opposition is quite strong and catching up to them, like, even just the littlest bit of a push could in fact sway things and change our whole government. So
Shannon, this question's for you. Some people think that the same arguments used now are the same arguments that are used to not give women the right to vote. What's your response to that?
I think it's different because most of the arguments that I've seen against 16-year-olds having the vote is that they're too young, whereas people stopping the women from having a vote was that they're women and they don't have the right kind of voice. Like, they don't voice the same opinions as men, whereas 16 and 17-year-olds, they're just too young to know what opinions to be speaking out about. So it's a kind of bit different in that sense. They put down women and, like, oppose their ideas because they didn't like to hear what they had to say, whereas 16 and 17-year-olds are just being put down because they're too young. And I feel like it is true that I think they are too young to know.
Would you not say, though, that listening to what you've just said, that this is kind of the same argument, that kind of they wouldn't understand attitude?
I think their opinions are perfectly valid, but I don't think that they know enough to have an impact because...
Can I say something? Well, for example, when they were denying women the vote, I think the whole argument behind that was that, oh, women just don't know. Like, they just aren't educated enough, so they can't make the educated decisions because they didn't view us as mature as them, did they? Like, they viewed us as just kind of the ones who sat and did the sewing or whatever. And it's like, it feels like a really similar argument in my opinion, especially considering when women were first granted the vote, they were only granted the vote at 30, whereas all men, at the age of 21 were granted the vote. And that just shows, I think, that there was something to do with maturity there because they felt like women were only mature enough after the age of 30.
Well, but thanks both of you. I think you've made some really great points. I think this is a conversation that we need to have with young and old people, and we need to kind of be including everyone in this conversation and kind of just getting everyone to understand politics a bit more and engaging everyone. I think it's something that we'll continue to talk about for a while. I don't think will be resolved anytime soon. That's it for this episode, and thanks for listening, guys.